Hello and welcome back to the Human Workforce. I'm Simon Carver, and as always, I'm glad you're here with us. Today we're getting into something that a lot of people feel in their bones at work, even if they don't always have a clean name for it. It's that strange shift where the people moving up aren't always the people carrying the load. They're often the people standing closest to the right doorway when it opens.
And I'm Lachlan. Good to be with you, mates. Yeah, this one's a bit spicy, isn't it? We're talking about that workplace move where merit sort of gets benched and proximity gets picked for the starting side. Not who's built the thing, fixed the thing, or dragged it over the line with duct tape and bad coffee. More like who's got the right vibe with the boss's boss. Bit of a furphy, really.
It is, and to be fair, relationships have always mattered. Trust matters, chemistry matters. Nobody's saying leadership is just a spreadsheet of output. But there's a difference between trust built through real work and trust built because someone feels familiar, easy, safe, socially aligned. Those are not the same thing.
Exactly. One is, I've seen this person in the storm. They'll hold the line. The other is, we had a laugh at off-site drinks and they say yes without making things awkward. And look, one of those is leadership material. The other one might just be good at hovering near the barbecue.
That's a very Australian way to put it. But yes, what we're seeing, or what many people seem to be seeing, is a kind of social promotion loop. The latter used to be messy, but at least it pointed toward execution. Now sometimes it feels like there's an express elevator for people who can mirror the language of power before they've actually carried responsibility.
Yeah, and that's the bit that stings for the folks in the trenches. The ones who've got the institutional memory, the technical depth, the scar tissue. They know why the system is held together with 3 old decisions and 1 dangerous compromise. They know which regulator, customer, product line, or team dependency can blow up if you pull the wrong lever. But because they're busy doing the actual work, they miss the social lap around the office. Then someone else gets the title.
And the emotional cost of that is bigger than people admit. Because it's not just disappointment, it's disorientation. Teams start asking, what exactly gets rewarded here? Good judgment? Follow-through? Courage? Or just being personally adjacent to influence?
That's it. The signal gets scrambled. If social alignment beats delivery often enough, people adapt. They stop bringing the hard truth. They polish the optics. They spend more time managing impressions than solving problems. It's like tuning a bike engine by painting the fuel tank. Looks flash, doesn't run.
And in the age of AI, I think this matters even more. Because as more routine work gets automated, the human part of leadership gets more valuable, not less. Not charisma by itself, not posturing. Actual judgment, accountability, the ability to understand consequences and make sound calls under pressure.
Yeah, AI can help with speed, patterns, drafts, summaries, all that gear. But if the wrong person is steering because they were socially convenient, then you've just strapped a rocket to confusion. Even a kangaroo could trip over that one.
So that's our setup today. What happens when organizations reward closeness over competence? Why that creates a very specific kind of leadership problem, and why the people who actually know how to build things keep getting called back when the shine wears off.
All right, let's talk about the manager who's, well, way over their skis. I love that phrase because you can just see it. Someone bombing down the slope, poles flapping, grin still on, absolutely not in control. In work terms, it's the leader with the title, the comp, the polished language, but not the depth. They can talk around the work, just not through it.
Yes, and they often sound extremely supportive. That's part of what makes this so slippery. They don't come in twirling a villain mustache. They come in saying the right things. I'm here for you. Tell me what you need. Happy to remove roadblocks. And at first, that can sound generous, even humble.
But then you clock something odd. The help is always abstract. It's never, I've looked at the operating model, here's the risk, or this decision breaks the workflow, here's the fix. It's more like supportive wallpaper. Nice pattern. Doesn't hold the roof up.
That's good. Supportive wallpaper. Because the offer of help can become a shield. If I keep saying I'm available, maybe nobody notices I can't actually diagnose the problem. And the real test is what happens when someone accepts the offer in a concrete way.
Right. Imagine a team member says, "Great, I need you to decide between these two compliance paths, because if we choose wrong, we create 6 months of rework." Suddenly the room goes very quiet. Or they say, "Can you align legal, product, and operations around this architecture change?" That's when the wheels wobble.
And then you get delay disguised as collaboration. More meetings, more check-ins, more requests for visibility, more language around alignment. Not because the team needs clarity, but because the leader needs time. Time to avoid being exposed. Time to borrow confidence from the room.
Yep, death by calendar invite. I've seen versions of this where nothing is technically blocked, but everything slows down anyway. Decisions drift, risks stay fuzzy. The people doing the work start translating upward and downward at the same time. They're managing the task and the manager. That's exhausting, mate.
It creates hidden risk, too, because teams learn what not to say. If your boss can't really help, you stop escalating the hard stuff unless it's on fire. You simplify the truth to protect the meeting, and the organization starts mistaking calm surfaces for healthy systems.
That's a big one. No splashing doesn't mean the boat isn't taking on water. Sometimes the calm team is just quietly bailing with their shoes. And because the overskis leader is often good at sounding strategic, senior people above them may not see the gap for ages.
I think that's where the human tension lives. The team can even like this person. They may be pleasant, encouraging, socially skilled, but niceness is not the same as stewardship. If you don't understand the machinery, your kindness can still leave people exposed.
Spot on. And to be fair, not every lightweight leader is malicious. Some are just promoted too fast, too sideways, too politically. But intent doesn't undo impact. If you keep offering a hand you can't steady, people fall anyway.
And in an AI-heavy workplace, weak leadership gets amplified. If leaders don't understand the work deeply enough to ask good questions, they'll use intelligent tools badly. They'll confuse polished output with real progress. They'll accelerate the appearance of competence.
Which is dangerous because then the team isn't just dealing with vague leadership, they're dealing with vague leadership at speed. That's how little cracks turn into expensive sinkholes.
And then comes the part that is almost predictable. The project slips. The product doesn't land. The process that was supposed to be transformed is now drifting sideways. At some point, reality breaks through the social fog. Things have to work. Customers notice, deadlines harden, risk becomes visible. And suddenly, the organization remembers the person who actually knows how the thing was built.
Yep, the phone rings for the original builder, the architect, the operator, the one who got passed over because they were too busy doing the job instead of curating their aura. Now it's, "Hey, can you just have a quick look?" which is corporate for, "Please save us from the mess by Friday."
First, they audit the confusion. They translate vague ambition into a workable plan. Then, they rebuild the foundation that was neglected while everyone was enjoying the honeymoon phase of new leadership. Then, they execute on a compressed timeline because so much time has already been lost.
And here's the kicker. The fixer often does it because they care about the work, the team, the reputation, the customer. They're not rescuing vanity, they're protecting reality. But doing that over and over, it burns people out like a clutch riding uphill.
Burnout, yes, but also resentment. Quiet resentment, the kind that changes how people relate to an organization. They start asking, why am I only visible when there's rubble? Or why is competence treated like emergency infrastructure instead of leadership material?
Too right. If your best people are permanently on disaster duty, you've built a silly system. They become the unofficial safety net for someone else's title. And after a while, they either harden up and disengage, or they leave. Then the organization loses the very people who knew where the traps were.
Which brings us to the bigger question. What kind of leadership does this era actually demand? If AI is taking on more routine tasks, then human leadership has to get better at the things tools can't carry alone. Judgment, context, moral courage, owning consequences, knowing when speed is reckless and when caution is avoidance.
And competence. We've got to say that plainly. Not fake certainty, not polished vagueness, competence. You don't need a leader to know every nut and bolt, but they do need enough depth to ask sharp questions, make real calls, and be accountable when it goes pear-shaped.
Integrity-based leadership, to me, also means being willing to protect the institution from your own ego. If someone else has the expertise, you don't sideline them because it threatens your image. You bring them in early. You reward truth. You make rescue less necessary.
Yeah, the best friend a boss can have isn't the one who nods along. It's the one who delivers, spots the risk, asks the awkward question, and keeps the wheels on. That's not old-fashioned. That's future-proof, especially now.
So if this episode hits a nerve, maybe that's useful. Maybe the question isn't just who is in charge, but what are we rewarding? Closeness? Comfort? Or the hard human capacity to build something real and stand behind?
That's the one. Thanks for spending time with us on the human workforce. Simon, always a pleasure, mate.
Likewise, Lachlan. And thanks to all of you for listening. We'll keep exploring what human work looks like as this next era unfolds.
Catch you next time. Bye for now.
Take care, everyone.